The worst. Drinking in front of the camera.
It's either that or I don't talk.
I'm weighing the pros and cons. Give me a sec. So we hit our second goal on Patreon.
Yay!
Means we have work to do.
Yes, it does.
Means we have a new show to do.
Yep.
What are we calling the show?
DISCRETION?
It was terrible.
Yes, it was.
Alright, fine. We'll come up with a name eventually. Probably by the end of this episode, maybe, possibly. So basically the goal of this show is to take recently placed first place teams? Recently placed first place? Teams that have recently placed first place
there we
in go. ROC Super Qualifiers, major tournaments, be it Nationals, Worlds. We might have to go back in time depending on how fast the episodes start to come out. We're going to try this weekly or bi-weekly?
I think bi-weekly.
I think weekly.
We'll see.
We'll try it. We'll see what comes of it. In any case, the first episode we're doing of this might be the longest because the team is big and the sideline is maximum sized. Now, some of you might be wondering why I'm wearing a hat. One of the ideas that we came up with for this show is you guys can send me your hat for your store or your group or your whatever, and I will name drop your hat for this. This is an Avengers hat today, so I'm not name dropping anybody.
Name dropping Avengers. All the Avengers.
I kind of have to.
Yeah.
This team has a Quinjet. Let's break down what's on the team, okay. And then we're gonna split up. Not really. We'll stay married. And we'll talk about our parts of it. You talk rules, I talk stratagem.
Sounds good.
All right. So the team consisted of a Quinjet. It also had Jarvis, who for some reason decided to elude me this evening, and I threw him on the ground. Despotellis with Adara.
Possessed.
Yeah, okay. Despotellis with Adara. The Nighthawk Prime. And Ultron 8 at 30 points. Okay. On the sideline, 9 ID cards.
That's impressive.
It's pretty impressive. Now, you can get into the rules on the side. I'm not going to talk about the rules about it. Anyway, these ID cards included the Hulk from the Age of Ultron. Now, because of the size of the sideline, there's one character assigned per card, and then he doesn't get much choice through each one. Hulk, with the Indestructible Hulk from the Nick Fury set. The Iron Man card from Age of Ultron with the Iron Man figure number 001A from Invincible Iron Man. What was that face for?
That figure was the bane of my AVX.
Captain America from the Avengers Age of Ultron movie starter set. A Shield level 7 card with Nick Fury. Nick Fury, of course, the one with the Watcher's eyes in his hands, the super rare from Nick Fury. Thor ID card with King Thor. The Hank Pym ID card with Ant-Man number 003 from the movie set. Triathlon with Triathlon. Not 3D Man. Black Widow with the Black Widow from the Age of Ultron movie starter set. That's 75 points. And the Nova ID card with the 60-point Nova figure number 031 from the Guardians of the Galaxy set.
Alright.
Most of that was sideline.
Yeah.
So, I guess we'll split off. You can talk rules and I can talk strategy.
Alrighty. Do this.
Pretty fly!
So, talking rules breakdown for this particular team. Now, there is a lot going on with this team, so I'm actually just going to highlight the most important rules to think about with this team instead of analyzing every single character. I'm going to start off with the Quinjet. Now, the Quinjet was being played at 70 points with the resource dial. Now, that does make this a 75-point character. It's something that they introduced with the Brainiac Skull ship. In brackets, they have plus 5 points. That is the only game mechanic so far that'll actually change the point value of a character itself. It's something that's built into the characters. So like something like possession doesn't change it, assigning relics, resources, that doesn't change the actual point value. This will, it's a built-in mechanic to the character itself. So for whatever purposes, say leadership or special powers that are looking for specific point values of characters, this particular build has it considered a 75 point character. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about on this was the sideline. Now, right now, the sideline rules could be more fleshed out. We would like to see them more fleshed out, but as it stands right now, we know that you can have 3 per 100 points to a maximum of 15. Now, because this build is within the 300 point modern, that max is going to be at 9 because 3 times 3. So this particular build actually does use the entire sideline that you are allowed to have for a 300 point game. The next point of the sideline is putting characters on the sideline. Now I'm just going to point this out, is that like King Thor is a unique, and there are uniques on the team. Now, because he's on the sideline, it is going to go with the unique rule of the game, whereas King Thor's on the sideline, you couldn't have a regular King Thor on your team. You can't double up. So your sideline, while it's not part of your force or your build cost, it is subject to certain rules such as uniques and primes. Now that's important for a character, say like Nighthawk, and we have Triathlon. Now there is a prime version of Triathlon. I believe they have the same name on the ID card.
They have the same real name.
They have the same real name. So for this particular build, having the Triathlon card, you wouldn't be able to bring in 3D Man, have him on your sideline, because you already have a prime on the team with the Nighthawk prime. The next rule I wanted to go over with the sideline is the ID cards. Now, when you start a round, you get to choose which starting line you have your characters sitting at. It is a choice that you make each round. So when you have a tournament that has multiple rounds, you get to reveal forces, see what you're going up against, and then choose which starting line is assigned to that character. So just looking at King Thor, now his top dial you're never going to be able to get out in the 300 point format because it's 396 points. But he does have a 200 and a 300 point dial. So depending on what your opponent looks like, you may at the beginning of the game assign either the 200 point dial or the 300 point dial, depending on how you feel that that game is going to go. There are also, we're looking at Iron Man here has 300 or 150. If you want to get him out earlier, 150. Jason will go over that more. And we've got the Hulk here, 100 and 300. Why this is also important is because of the resource dial that's going on with the Quinjet here, is that as this moves along, this tells you which character you can add to your force as a free action. So as you move along, we get to click 17, it looks like. No, sorry, 13. I'm not wearing my glasses. Where you hit 160. Now that would allow you to bring in the lower point Iron Man, but you'd have to wait until you get to the end of the dial where it's 300 to bring in that one. So that's something to think about as to when you're starting up the starting lines. Once again, that's something Jason will go over, but it is a rule that you can do. What you're doing each round, you're picking which starting line going into the game. It's not something that's going to be assigned for the entire tournament. Now, because specifically in the rules, it says that the dial does not stop turning once it hits that final click, it is possible to roll over it. Now, clearing action tokens, you may click the dial. Taking damage, you may click the dial. When you use the call-in help ability, you may roll a die. But when you use that free action to bring a character onto the board, you have to roll that die. So you're gonna get up to the sweet spot, hit that 300, bring your really big guy in, and then roll back to the beginning of the dial. This is gonna keep that dial spinning, and it keeps you from staying on that sweet spot and constantly bringing in these really huge 300-point guys to completely destroy your opponent. Now, that's not to say you're not gonna do that, but it'll take you a little bit to build back up to that spot where you're gonna bring out the big guy again. Also, the Quinjet is cards in the scanner.
Okay.
The Quinjet is one of the newer vehicles that does have a pilot abilities, and it has prerequisites based on keywords of the characters, and then you get certain powers based on which pilot you have in there. In this particular build of the team, Jarvis is usually the pilot. The other thing with the Quinjet vehicle, it does have the autopilot trait, which you're going to follow the rules there, where if you make an attack without a pilot, you're going to take that one unavoidable damage. I believe that is the most pertinent rules that we wanted to go over for this particular build, and we'll hand it over to Jason, and he's going to go in depth about the strategy of the game.
Okay. Wait.
So one ruling that I missed, and I'll put this in for you guys, goes with Jason's new favorite saying, is that Ultron is better at being an Avenger than the Avengers are. And the fact that these Ultron drones, while you are paying at Force Construction 30 points for them, for all intents and purposes for gameplay and game effects, anything that is looking for the value of a character, they are considered their higher point value. This particular one is 120. So when you're looking at it being 120 and you add in something like an ID card, which means that the character calling them in has to be equal or more points, you now have a huge option for very little point cost in your team build. And anybody that is 100 points or less can now be pulled in with the power action of the Ultron at the beginning of the game, or the beginning of your turn.
All right. Let's strategize. Map. Couldn't resist. South Park joke. All right. So, let's talk about the two combinations of figures that we're going to see regularly in the metagame. One of which is, of course, the Quinjet and Jarvis. These two are going to be seen on a lot of teams together, starting at 130 points when you include the resource dial on the Quinjet, Jarvis himself, and a maximum of 6 ID cards. So there's going to be a lot of teams running that. The next combination I want to talk about a lot of teams are going to be running, because this is a team split. There's two parts to this team that can be good on a lot of teams. The other part that's going to be good on a lot of teams is Nighthawk Prime with Despotellis and Adara. Now, the reason this is good is Nighthawk Prime locks values of basically printed values. So your opponent is attacking with what they have. The only real option with Nighthawk Prime, if I remember correctly, is you would be required to decrease your opponent's stats in order to get any kind of shots in on them. So, ideally, Nighthawk Prime, Despotellis, Adara on the same team will basically lock your opponent into the most frustrating situation that they could possibly be in. One of the big reasons for that is, like, there's even very few 300-point characters that crack a 12 attack. And even a 12 attack requires an 8. If you find one character with probability control, you're very likely to make somebody very upset with you very quickly. As well, Nighthawk Prime will have Despotellis next to him, so the shape change roll is increased by 1. Throw in another character. This is the neutral ground character, the Ultron 8. I'd expect to see him on a lot of teams because his attack stats are probably the highest. With the running shot, 11 attack, psychic blast, 4 damage. Ultron 8 is probably the choice one you're going to see a little bit of everywhere from here on in, as far as just getting a statted one out. Now, add that next to that team, he's got a 20 defense. The Nighthawk's forcing the defenses, or the attacks to a base level. And of course, that second click is massively damaging in all degrees. Now, combine this here with the Quinjet. Now, based on the research I've done and I've listened to 2 Clicks from KO's recent podcast where they actually talked to Easton Brock, the guy who piloted this team to a win in a super qualifier, or an ROC super qualifier in Alabama. He had Jarvis a lot of the time piloting this vehicle. Now, Jarvis's stats aren't great, but that's okay. You don't have to use the pilot attack and range stats all the time. In fact, it might be a decent idea to just take Jarvis's perplex here and there and use it where you need to use it. For the most part, that's probably not what's getting used. Also worth mentioning is the combination of Despotellus, Ultron 8, and Nighthawk Prime can be carried by this vehicle very easily. So if you actually position it properly, you can have, I don't have a map in front of me, but you can have Nighthawk Prime right next, in front of a Despotellus, and kind of kitty corner to Despotellus after being carried the Ultron 8. I'm trying here, behind there, and you've got 20 defenses on everything right there. And because of the Nighthawk Prime, they've got a nightmare to hit. So, with that being said, let's talk about the choice in ID cards. Now, ideally, Ultron 8 is the man to bring the stuff out. And there is actually, oddly enough, there's a curve to this. Alright, so for those of you familiar with Magic the Gathering versus system, any card game with a resource system, even Hearthstone is a good example of this, there's something often referred to as the curve. The curve is, as you have the resources to spend it, you spend the maximum amount that you can in order to get an upwards climb on it. Now, think of the curve in this as the resource dial, and think of the resources to spend on this as your miasma of ID characters. Now, going back into further looks at the research that I've done, the old Iron Man was never played above 150. That was a given. Iron Man was actually a prime choice to bring out fast and hard if that's what the team needed. As well, the Hulk was more often played at 100 points, giving the Ultron a chance to whip him out and do some massive damage with him. The Captain America, this is the starter set Captain America, the one that's able to make close combat attacks from 6 squares away with a 9 movement and charge with a 12 attack. So teams like this using the Nighthawk Prime and the Despotellus will have this Captain America to have to deal with an incredibly decent attack. I like how I said incredibly decent. So anyway, let's talk about the curve before I get into deeper talk about things. So the curve goes that in the early game, you have characters like the Ant-Man, like Triathlon, like Nova, like Black Widow, that can be brought out by the entirety of your team. Almost the entirety of your team. The entirety of the team that you want bringing things out. Nighthawk Prime can bring out 3 of these characters with one of them if you play 100 at 50 points, although I'm pretty sure he's more likely played at 100 points with the exploit weakness. So let's just go to Nova, Triathlon, and Black Widow. Now, Nova comes with a 2 damage pulse wave at a small price of damaging himself. A minor delay when you consider that what pulse wave does and what pulse wave does with 2 damage. Teams like this, the Nova's pulse wave is going to be a pain in the butt to Despotellus. Next you have Triathlon, who's very bursty right off the gates. He's got an 11 attack, 3 damage, charge, and flurry. So if you can get him in the right situation, he can actually do up to 6 damage against the right characters. And you also have the Black Widow with shape change, willpower, traded charge, precision strike, sidestep, and an 11 attack with 3 damage. So for the most part, you got a pretty decent output on your early game. Now, the idea is once these 3 guys have come out and done their damage, this has been rolled 3 times. Now, if you were to average it out to 3, you're if you're lucky and average it out to 3. I mean, things happen, the dice roll happens. It's not the only way this thing moves, so bear with me here. But let's say you rolled 2 for all of them and you're now on click 7. You're up at the 80-point value on this. Now, I'm going to assume you've taken an action with this, so it's moved at least once because you've had to clear it. So now you're in the 90-point range. Nothing is coming out yet, but you still have Ultron 8 to bring out sizable characters, which is why you have things like the Hulk, the Captain America, and the 100-point Iron Man. So the Ultron keeps the flow going until you get above that. Now, if you've rolled incredibly low and you're stuck at 120, well, now take a free action, you have a Nick Fury. Anybody complaining? I didn't think so. Nick Fury is a potent piece with 9 range, improved targeting, the map, 11 attack, 3 damage with a special power that gives him probability control and the ability to choose an opponent, a power an opponent can use within range and line of fire, which, is the map. And that character can't use that power. So this could be a power granted by an entity. This could be a power granted by a trait. As long as they can use a power, Nick Fury can say, no, you can't use that power now, and then attack with an 11 attack and 3 damage. Add in the fact that you've got Jarvis's Perplex, and you've got some pretty potent output on that. Now, to carry on, when you do that, one thing to remember is that you whip back the dial to between click 1 and 6. So you are kind of limited in that fact. And then if Nick Fury does take damage, although unlikely because he's got stealth, he'll come back on the board as well. Not losing any points though. Most important. So now one of the goals, of course, to this is to get to a higher point dial. You got to read the situation you're in this particular build, and then this is where the discussion about the starting line comes in. If you're up against a slow, methodical team that's going to slowly work its way towards you, or the game isn't going to take very long, start Thor at your 300-point dial, and possibly the Hulk at the 300-point dial. Because, I would keep the Hulk at 100. Because when you get to that 300, which is very easily done, you will reap the benefits of a 300-point character extra on the board. Now, one of the things that's becomes highly suggested as far as when you bring the character on the board for free is to throw him in as the pilot. Because then they're safe in the vehicle, and then their attack, range, and damage powers become the source of the vehicle's stats. Which is another potent level on top of that. Now, another thing worth mentioning about the Quinjet in its entirety is that it can't be penetrated. Damage, any penetrating damage that it takes, don't look at me, can't be penetrated. Any damage that it takes that's penetrating damage can still be reduced. Now, granted, it only has toughness, but that can go a long way against Psychic Blast in some cases. Some people get confident with a 2 damage Psychic Blast, and you can laugh at them with the 1 damage that you take. And then, of course, if they manage to hit that 20 defense being handed out by the Despotellus Adara combination, and the Nighthawk Prime forcing them down on their defenses. There's a lot of moving parts to this team. This is not a team that at first, it's kind of obvious when you have 9 figures on the sideline, 5 figures on the board, and a stack this big to bring into your team. In a nutshell, if you can get all these parts moving properly and you're patient enough, this is a team that is going to explode on somebody, and they are going to be caught off guard. Now, counterpoint to that, can't give you one thing without giving you another. So let's talk about how to deal with this. He's your problem. Along with him. These two are a massive thorn in the side of this team. Nighthawk's ability to shape change at an accelerated shape change roll. Now, if you go back to that combination of ways around to position that I suggested, I wish I had a map for that. I feel so stupid. But once all those figures are together, Nighthawk Prime is going to be pretty close to the peak. I mean, he's got a 5/6, 4/5/6, 3/4/5/6, and a 2+, which is already the maximum that you can get on a shape change roll if you have them all adjacent to Nighthawk and Despotellus. So now you're going to see a 3+ on the shape change, which is reasonably good. So that's the first step, is getting by that shape change. Now, ways by that shape change, Battle Fury is one way. Shield Paranormal Investigators is another way. I believe he may come with stealth on one of his powers. I actually have the cards today, so we can check that out. He's got Energy Shield, Shape Change, and he's got a special power that gives him stealth, but it's later in the dial about Death Point. So, ultimately, Pulse Wave is a good friend of yours. I'm not going to lie. If you can get Despotellus in there and possibly hit him too, that kind of keeps things mitigated. But Pulse Wave's a good friend of yours. Battle Fury's a good friend of yours. and just anything you can do to get the Nighthawk Prime down. As well, get this Quinjet gone, because the Quinjet also it has reasonable stats. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 clicks of health on a 75-point character. And now when you consider that 20 defense, you got two choices. You take him out at the 20 defense, or you try to take those other two figures out. It's a test of patience and stratagem in this case. And I can't say there's a surefire way past this. Patience, dice rolls, probability control are all your friend. Rocket Raccoon if your opponent is making way too many shape changes for your own personal health, or whatever you can do in order to weather this storm, because this storm is a-coming. As well, keeping distance is a good key too. Biggest ranges other than characters that are being brought on the board is about a 6. Yeah, it averages about a 6 range. Every character that has range has 6, as a matter of fact, including the Quinjet. Other than Adara, but Adara is on Despotellus, who can't have his stats increased. Did I miss anything? I didn't miss anything. So, in a nutshell, it's difficult to get close to this team, it's difficult to deal with this team, it's difficult to do a lot of things with this team against it. It's a very amazing piece of work that Aaron and Easton put together. And as far as areas of tweaks go, there are a couple places that you can actually make some modifications, and a lot of it lies in the sideline. And there's a couple spaces where you can make some modifications on the board. If you're not 100% comfortable, like myself, with trying to rely on a 20 defense, maybe you can switch out Despotellus and Adara for some more Ultron drones. These are all things you can think about, consider, mull in your head. But really, the biggest room for maneuverability as far as tweaking this team comes in the sideline and the ID cards. There are some that are easier to replace than others, and some that, aren't. If I was to actually suggest right off the top of my head where there is room for wiggling, I would say you can differentiate with Thor, Hank Pym, and Black Widow. Couple options. With Black Widow, you can flip over to the She-Hulk, who's got Charge and Flurry at the same point value. Hank Pym, you can switch out with a ton of options that are a little bit more offensive. But Hank Pym does come with the counter inspiration to other Ultrons, and could possibly make 23 defenses of characters he's inspiring. So that's another thing to be aware of if you're against other Ultron teams, because Ultron is relevant in the game. And of course, when I say Thor can be replaced if you can find a figure at 300 points that you think is a better fit than Thor. There are also other Thors. The King Thor is just an option. If you can find other characters in that point range. I didn't bring all my stack of ID cards, but that's where there's room for difference. And possibly Captain America, if you can think of something like... I think Captain America is really good in this. I personally wouldn't switch him based on what we got right here. Although I have to double check Steve Rogers' real name on his card, because I believe he's also an option that could show up as an alternative. Anyway, that's been the stratagem behind the team. Let's pull it back with me and Amber in front of the camera again, and we'll kind of wind it down. Alright, so that was the team rules and strategy in a nutshell. Now, this is your chance to take a look at it, see what we might have missed as far as strategy goes. I know Aaron is going to be all over the comments in this video.
Oh, of course. But
he hates when I talk about his stuff. He hates when I talk about his stuff. As well, we want to hear your thoughts on the team and your thoughts in general on the show, what we could be doing differently. This is, of course, a new show, a new idea that we're kind of mulling around, and we've kind of deconstructed to the best of our abilities on... I guess we didn't take as much time as we could have, but we did a little bit more research than I think we're going to get on most teams. Although, I think we're probably going to spend more time looking at what all the possibilities are. I mean, I barely covered what Ultron can do as far as the ID cards. Well, no, I think I covered at great length what he can do. But, Amber, would you play this team?
I feel my particular playstyle on this is I feel like this particular build has too many working parts for me to do. I found my first year at Nationals that I'm not very good at managing a huge team that has a lot of things doing with it. I'm a lot better at doing simple and hard. By hard, I mean like hard hitting.
I'll show you something simple and hard.
Stop. Yeah, so for my playstyle, I would not play this team, but that doesn't mean it's a bad team. I can see definitely how it works and why it works and why it does so well.
I need to go talk to the round table. I'm breaking up with it.
No.
This is my new ID card resource.
You're welcome.
Amber judged, so that's how I got it, and she didn't care about it apparently. So mine.
Because, like I said, the complexity that the type of build that this is going to bring into the game, I would never be able to pilot.
Now, as well, this is a very, very potent moving part team that at face value, when you put what goes on the board, people will look at it and go, huh?
Yeah.
And then you put the sideline beside the table, and they'll go, ah. And that's always been my goal, is to get an intimidating sideline and somebody beat me to it. In any case, I'm giving this a big old thumbs up as a team that I would see myself playing. And I'm very, very impressed with the work that has been done here. And it is magical and it's wonderful. Oh my God, it's beautiful. As well, guys, I want to mention that if you want to be adding to the hat for the show hat, if you will, email us at marriedwithclicks@gmail.com or contact us on our Facebook at facebook.com/marriedwithclicks and just message us, and we'll send you the address in which to send said hat, and we will send us a little story about the hat itself and where it's from, and we'll help you out with that. In the meantime, that has been the first episode of...
No, I still don't have a title.
Episode 1 of I Still Don't Have a Title.
Yay.